What if the people meant to nurture you turned every gathering into a stage where you were the servant, the outsider, the forgotten? What if one dinner, one empty plate was all it took to shatter years of silence? I spent decades watching my mother serve prime cuts and French desserts to my sister's family while I sat with yesterday's leftovers. But that night, when she said those 5 words that carved deeper than any knife ever could, I finally understood blood doesn't make you family, and silence doesn't make you weak. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a paralegal at Harborview Legal Services, a small firm tucked away in the historic district of Savannah, Georgia. It's not glamorous work, but it's mine earned through years of night classes and student loans that still haunt my bank account every month. That evening in October, I arrived at my mother's house at 6:30 p.m. just as the Spanish moss was catching the last golden rays of sunset. The old Victorian had been in our family for 3 generations, its wraparound porch and gingerbread trim a testament to better times. The dining room windows glowed warm against the darkening sky, and I could already hear Caroline's laughter mixing with the clink of good china. I let myself in through the side door, the one that leads straight to the kitchen, the one I'd been using since I was 13 and started helping with dinner preparations. The smell hit me immediately: prime ribeye steaks, garlic butter, fresh rosemary. My stomach clenched. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, saving my appetite for what I foolishly thought would be a family dinner. "Rachel, finally," my mother Evelyn said without looking up from the stove. "The salad needs dressing, and Caroline's children are getting restless." I moved automatically, muscle memory from countless family gatherings guiding my hands to the refrigerator, to the cutting board, to the serving dishes. Through the pass-through window, I could see them all seated already: Caroline in her designer dress, her husband Derek checking his phone, their twin boys 8 years old now fidgeting in their seats. My Aunt Margaret was there too, along with 2 cousins I barely saw except at these obligatory gatherings. When I finished plating the salad, I carried it to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the one with the gold rim that came out only for special occasions. 8 place settings. I counted them twice, then looked at the chairs. 9 people, 8 places. "Mom," I called back to the kitchen. "Should I get another place setting?" "No need," she replied, emerging with a platter of perfectly seared steaks. "Everything's already arranged." She moved around the table like a conductor before her orchestra, placing each steak with precision. Derek got the largest cut, perfectly centered on his plate. Caroline received hers with a flourish and a mother's smile. The twins each got smaller portions, cut into neat strips. Aunt Margaret, my cousins, everyone received their share of the feast. I stood there, waiting. When she passed by my empty spot at the table, she didn't even pause. "Mom." My voice came out smaller than I intended. She was already returning with individual chocolate mousses in crystal glasses, each one topped with a delicate sugarwork butterfly. Again, she served everyone but me. When she finally sat down, she gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "There's leftover chicken from yesterday's lunch in the refrigerator if you're hungry." "Rachel." The room fell silent. Even the twins stopped squirming. Derek actually looked up from his phone. Aunt Margaret cleared her throat. "Evelyn, didn't you prepare a steak for Rachel?" My mother picked up her napkin, smoothed it across her lap with deliberate care, and spoke the words that would finally break whatever threadbare bond still existed between us: "I only serve for family." The words hung in the air like a blade. Caroline's fork paused halfway to her mouth, a piece of medium-rare perfection balanced on the silver tines. Her eyes met mine for just a moment. Was that triumph I saw there, or pity before she looked away and continued eating? "Am I not family?" I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. My mother's response was to begin cutting her steak, the knife sliding through the tender meat with surgical precision. "Please don't make a scene. Rachel, you know how these dinners upset your digestion." I looked around at the table. Derek had returned to his phone. The twins were focused on their food. My cousins studied their plates as if they contained the secrets of the universe. Only Aunt Margaret met my eyes, her expression unreadable. This was it. This was the moment that all the other moments had been building toward. Every Christmas when Caroline's gifts overwhelmed the tree while mine fit in a single recycled bag. Every family photo where I was asked to take the picture instead of being in it. Every celebration where I was the help, not the guest. I stood there in my second-hand blazer, the one I'd worn to work that day because I wanted to look nice for dinner, and felt the full weight of 34 years of being the daughter who didn't quite belong. The silence at that dinner table transported me back 21 years, to the day everything changed. I was 13, standing in the same dining room, when the phone rang at 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Mom answered with her usual cheerful voice, but I watched it drain from her face like water from a broken cup. Dad had collapsed at his office. The stroke was massive, instantaneous. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. In the weeks that followed, while Mom retreated into her grief, I learned what it meant to hold things together. Caroline was only 10, still young enough to be shielded from the harsh realities of mortgage payments and grocery bills. She was the baby, as Mom constantly reminded me, too fragile for the weight of our new reality. I took a job at Thornton's Books on Bull Street, a dusty little shop that smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. Mr. Thornton, ancient and kind, paid me under the table $5 an hour to stock shelves, ring up customers, and sweep floors after school. Every Friday, I'd hand my envelope of cash to Mom, keeping only enough for bus fare. "You're so strong, Rachel," she'd say, tucking the money into her purse without meeting my eyes. "You're going to be fine. You've always been my resilient one." Resilient. That word became my label, my identity, my cage. While Caroline spent afternoons at her art classes, Mom insisted creativity would help her process the grief I was stocking shelves until 9 p.m. Then coming home to do homework by the light of a desk lamp I'd bought at a yard sale. Caroline's art supplies appeared like magic $60 watercolor sets, professional-grade sketching pencils, canvas after canvas. When I asked for a new backpack to replace the one with the broken zipper, Mom sighed and said money was tight. The next week, Caroline got a leather-bound portfolio for her drawings. At school, I learned to hide the exhaustion. I'd sneak into the library during lunch to catch 15-minute naps between the stacks. My grades stayed steady. I couldn't afford for them to slip. College applications were coming, and I knew there would be no college fund waiting for me. Dad's life insurance had gone to the mortgage and Caroline's future education. Mom explained. I was strong enough to figure it out on my own. The Christmas after Dad died set the pattern for every holiday that followed. Caroline received a new easel, expensive brushes, and a set of oil paints that cost more than I made in a month. I got a journal from the dollar store and a sweater from the church donation box. Mom didn't even remove the tag that said St. Mary's Thrift. "Rachel doesn't need much," I heard her tell Aunt Margaret, who had asked about the disparity. "She's practical, not like Caroline, who feels everything so deeply. The baby needs beauty in her life to heal. But I felt everything too. I felt it when I walked past the music store and couldn't go in because piano lessons were a luxury we couldn't afford, though Caroline's art classes never stopped. I felt it when I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation while Caroline's closet bloomed with new clothes because the baby needs to feel confident at school. I felt it when I sat in the guidance counselor's office, checking the will work full-time box on my community college application while Caroline's acceptance letter to the Savannah College of Art and Design sat framed on the mantel. The job at the bookstore ended when Mr. Thornton died my senior year. I found work at a diner, then a grocery store, then eventually an accounting office where I filed papers and answered phones for minimum wage plus $1. Every paycheck went toward keeping us afloat while Mom focused on nurturing Caroline's artistic soul. "You don't understand what it's like for her," Mom would say when I dared to question the arrangement. "She's sensitive. She needs support. You're different, Rachel. You're a survivor." I survived. all right. I survived on peanut butter sandwiches while Caroline ate fresh meals. I survived on 4 hours of sleep while she spent weekends at art retreats. I survived being told, day after day, year after year, that my strength was an excuse for neglect, that my resilience was reason enough to always come second. Standing in that dining room at 34, watching my family eat their steaks while my place remained empty, I realized that 13-year-old girl was still inside me, still holding everything together, still being told she was strong enough to go without. The only difference was that now I finally understood they hadn't been complimenting my strength. They'd been justifying my abandonment. When high school ended, my future had already been decided by mathematics not the kind I'd studied, but the simple arithmetic of our bank account. Community college was my only option. I enrolled at Savannah Technical College, choosing accounting because it was practical, because it promised steady work, because dreamers didn't pay bills. My days blurred into a punishing routine, classes from 8 a.m. to noon, then straight to my job at Morrison & Associates, a small accounting firm downtown where I did data entry for $8 an hour. I'd eat lunch at my desk, usually a bag of chips from the vending machine, then work until 7 p.m., back home by 8, homework until midnight, then up at 6 a.m. to do it all again. Meanwhile, Caroline floated through her senior year of high school like she was starring in her own movie. Mom drove her to portfolio reviews at art schools across the Southeast. They stayed in hotels, ate at restaurants, collected glossy brochures from institutions that cost more per year than I'd make in 5. Caroline got into SCAD, Mom announced one evening, waving the acceptance letter like a winning lottery ticket. The Savannah College of Art and Design, $42,000 a year, not including supplies. That's wonderful, I said, calculating how many hours of data entry that represented. How will you afford it? We'll manage, Mom said, which I soon learned meant liquidating Dad's retirement account, taking out parent loans, and selling grandmother's jewelry, the same jewelry I'd been told was too precious to touch when I'd asked about selling it for my textbooks. Caroline's supply lists arrived like monthly bills. Prismacolor markers $300, MacBook Pro for digital design $2,000, studio fees $500 per semester. Mom paid them all without blinking, while I was using a calculator I'd found in the office's Lost and Found. During Caroline's freshman year at SCAD, I watched her transform into someone I barely recognized. She'd come home wearing designer thrift finds, talking about conceptual installations and the male gaze in contemporary art. She'd sprawl across the living room with her expensive supplies spread out like conquered territory, working on projects about the isolation of modern existence, while I sat at the kitchen table, reconciling spreadsheets for Morrison & Associates. You wouldn't understand, she'd say when I asked about her work. It's not about numbers. It's about feeling. I wanted to tell her about feelings, about the feeling of checking my bank balance before buying a $2 coffee, about the feeling of watching classmates go to 4-year universities while I memorized tax codes, about the feeling of being invisible in my own home unless someone needed something done. My graduation from community college came and went with barely a mention. Mom had a conflict. Caroline's sophomore showcase was the same weekend, and the baby worked so hard on her pieces. I walked across the stage to receive my associate degree in accounting to the applause of strangers, then drove myself back to an empty house. The contrast became even starker when I started working full-time at Morrison & Associates. My salary was decent for someone with a 2-year degree, $32,000 a year, but after taxes, student loan payments, and contributing to household expenses, I had just enough left to maintain my ancient Honda Civic and buy professional clothes from discount stores. Caroline, meanwhile, studied abroad in Florence for a semester. Mom called it an investment in her future. The same woman who told me generic ramen was perfectly nutritious was now paying for Caroline to eat authentic pasta while studying Renaissance art. The photos on Facebook showed my sister glowing in front of the Duomo, while I spent my lunch breaks in the firm's break room, eating sandwiches I'd made at 5:30 a.m. "Oh, why don't you go back to school?" Aunt Margaret asked once. Get your bachelor's degree. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. Rachel's doing fine where she is. She's practical, not a dreamer like Caroline. Besides, someone needs to be stable while the baby finds her path. The baby's path, it turned out, was winding and expensive. After graduating from SCAD with a degree in fine arts and $60,000 in debt that Mom insisted was good debt, Caroline moved back home to develop her artistic voice. She set up a studio in the garage, which Mom climate-controlled at considerable expense, while I continued commuting to my cubicle at Morrison & Associates. I watched from my bedroom window as delivery trucks brought canvas and paint, easels and equipment. Each delivery was another reminder there had always been money, just never for me. The real irony, while Caroline painted abstract expressions of suffering and alienation, selling them for barely enough to cover materials, I was promoted to junior accountant, then senior accountant. I was actually building something brick by brick, number by number. But in our house, in our family's story, I was still just the responsible one, the one who didn't need help, the one who was strong enough to make it on her own. Caroline's wedding was announced with the fanfare of a royal engagement. She'd been dating Derek Whitmore for exactly 8 months when he proposed with a 2-carat diamond that caught the light like captured stars. Derek came from old Savannah money, the kind that had streets named after it, and Mom acted like Caroline had won the lottery. "We'll have it at the mansion on Forsyth Park," Mom declared, her eyes bright with plans I knew I'd never be part of. "Spring wedding, of course. The azaleas will be in bloom." The budget materialized like a magic trick $50,000 that apparently had been hiding somewhere all along. When I asked where it came from, Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Your father would have wanted this for her." My father would have wanted a lot of things, I thought. But I kept quiet. I'd learned that lesson long ago. The wedding planning consumed our house for 6 months. Fabric samples covered the dining room table. Cake tastings happened on Tuesday afternoons while I was at work. Mom and Caroline spent weekends touring venues, visiting florists, meeting with photographers whose day rates exceeded my monthly rent. "Rachel, you'll be a bridesmaid." "Of course," Caroline said, as if bestowing a great honor. The dress she chose cost $400 dusty rose chiffon that would never be worn again. I paid for it myself, along with the shoes, the hair, the makeup. When I mentioned the cost, Caroline's face crumpled. "I thought you'd want to be part of my special day," she said, tears threatening her carefully applied mascara. "Of course the baby needs her sister there," Mom added, as if I'd suggested abandoning Caroline at the altar. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue at 6 a.m. to help with setup. I steamed bridesmaids' dresses, arranged place cards, ran last-minute errands for things Caroline had forgotten. By the time the ceremony started at 4 p.m., I'd been on my feet for 10 hours. I stood at the altar in my dusty rose dress, the one I'd eaten ramen for 2 months to afford, and watched Mom cry as Caroline floated down the aisle in a $7,000 gown. The photographer captured every angle of the bride, the groom, the mother of the bride. In the official album, I appear in exactly 3 photos, always at the edge, always out of focus. The reception was held in the mansion's grand ballroom. Caroline and Derek's table sat on a raised platform, surrounded by white orchids flown in from Thailand. Mom gave a toast about her baby girl finding true love, about dreams coming true, about the joy of watching your child bloom. She never mentioned that another daughter stood in the room. 3 months after the wedding, Caroline and Derek bought a house in Ardsley Park, Savannah's most exclusive historic neighborhood. The down payment 20% of the $800,000 purchase price came from Mom. "It's an investment," she explained when I found out. "Real estate in Ardsley Park only appreciates. Besides, the baby needs stability to start her family." I was still living in my 1-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of Victory Drive, where the air conditioner wheezed like a dying animal and the neighbors' arguments came through the walls like radio plays. My requests to Mom for a small loan to fix my car had been met with lectures about financial responsibility. The housewarming party was another production. Mom hired caterers, ordered custom flower arrangements, bought Caroline and Derek a complete set of Le Creuset cookware that cost more than my monthly salary. My gift, a nice bottle of wine and a houseplant, looked pathetic next to Mom's generosity. "How thoughtful," Caroline said, setting my offerings aside without looking at them. "Mom, show them the kitchen renovation plans." Every holiday after that followed the same script. Christmas at Caroline's showcased Mom's largesse designer handbags, jewelry, checks slipped into envelopes with a wink. For Derek, golf clubs, watches, bourbon that cost $300 a bottle. For the twins, once they arrived, everything from European strollers to private preschool tuition. And for me, practical gifts that felt more like insults. A vacuum cleaner. Your apartment must get so dusty. A cookbook. Since you're eating alone so much. A bathrobe clearly re-gifted, with a Macy's tag from 3 years ago still attached. Last Christmas was the worst. I watched Caroline unwrap a pair of diamond earrings while I held a box containing a $12 scarf from Target, not even wrapped properly, still in the store bag with the receipt showing. "Money's been tight," Mom whispered to me, as if Caroline's diamonds had materialized from thin air. The birthday celebrations were equally lopsided. Caroline's 31st birthday party was held at the country club, with 50 guests and a 3-tier cake. My 34th birthday 2 months ago, Mom forgot entirely, then called 3 days later to say she'd been busy helping Caroline redecorate the guest room. I started keeping a mental ledger, not out of greed, but out of a desperate need to validate what I was seeing. Caroline's wedding, $50,000. House down payment, $160,000. Monthly help, with expenses, $2,000. My lifetime total of financial support after age 18, $0. But it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about what the money meant that one daughter was worth investing in, and one was expected to invest in herself. The transformation from guest to servant happened so gradually I almost didn't notice. It started small. "Rachel, could you help in the kitchen for just a minute?" and evolved into an expectation that I would arrive early to every family gathering to prep, cook, serve, and clean while everyone else socialized. Thanksgiving became my personal marathon. I'd arrive at Mom's house at 7 a.m. to start the turkey, a 20-pound bird that I'd wrestle into the oven while Mom supervised from her chair, coffee in hand. "Not too much sage in the stuffing," she'd say. "You know Caroline's digestion." So, while I chopped celery and onions, Caroline would sweep in around 11 a.m. Her twins already dressed in matching outfits that cost more than my weekly groceries. "Smells amazing in here," she'd chirp, then disappear into the living room where Derek was already stationed in front of the football game. "Rachel's so good at this," Mom would tell arriving relatives. "She has such practical skills, not artistic like Caroline, but useful." Useful. That's what I'd become useful, like a good knife or a reliable car. Something you didn't think about until you needed it. By 2 p.m., I'd have prepared a feast for 12 turkey, stuffing, 3 types of potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, rolls, and 2 kinds of pie. My clothes would smell like grease and gravy while Caroline held court in the living room, her silk blouse pristine, showing off her latest jewelry to our cousins. "Rachel, we need more wine," someone would call, and I'd leave whatever I was doing to fetch it. "Rachel," the twins spilled juice on the carpet, and I'd run with paper towels. "Rachel, could you warm this up?" "Rachel, do we have more napkins?" "Rachel, Rachel, Rachel." When dinner was finally served, I'd often eat standing in the kitchen, claiming I was too full from tasting while cooking. The truth was, there was never a place set for me at the main table. I'd been relegated to the kids' table until my late 20s, then graduated to eating in shifts, making sure everyone else had what they needed first. Christmas Eve was worse. Caroline would host at her Ardsley Park house, and I'd arrive at dawn to help with her elaborate spread. She'd plan menus from Pinterest beef Wellington, handmade pasta, desserts that required special molds and techniques I'd have to learn from YouTube videos at midnight. "I'm just not good at this stuff." Caroline would laugh to guests as I piped rosettes onto her bûche de Noël. Thank God for Rachel. She's like having staff, except free. Everyone would laugh. Even Mom. Especially Mom. While I worked, Caroline would give tours of her latest renovations, the artwork she'd acquired, the custom furniture Derek had surprised her with. Guests would coo over her taste, her style, her perfect life, while I scrubbed pots in her designer kitchen, my hands raw from hot water and steel wool. The twins' birthday parties were productions that required a full crew, which meant me. I'd spend entire Saturdays constructing elaborate themed decorations that Caroline had seen on Instagram. Once, it was a dinosaur excavation party that required me to bury dozens of plastic fossils in sandbox sand at 5 a.m. Another time, a princess party where I handmade 60 tissue paper flowers while Caroline got her nails done for the photos. "Aunt Rachel, you're sweaty," one of the twins observed during their space-themed party as I hauled in the third batch of asteroid rock candy I'd been making since 4 That's because Aunt Rachel works so hard," Mom said, but her tone suggested this was more character flaw than virtue. The gifts at these gatherings became their own form of humiliation. While Caroline opened designer bags and Derek received tech gadgets, I'd unwrap things that felt less like presents and more like reminders of my place. A coffee-stained mug from Mom's own kitchen. I thought you could use this at work. A half-used candle. Caroline didn't like the scent. Once, memorably, a self-help book about finding love after 30, inscribed with "Never give up hope" in Mom's handwriting. "Oh, that's thoughtful," I'd say, while Caroline's children tore through hundreds of dollars worth of toys. Last Easter was when I finally started to crack. I'd spent the entire morning dyeing eggs with the twins while Caroline and Mom went to a spa appointment. When they returned, relaxed and glowing, Caroline surveyed my work 3 dozen perfectly dyed eggs, an Easter egg hunt set up across the backyard, lunch prepared and warming in the oven. "The purple ones are a little uneven," she said, frowning at my hours of work. "And you forgot the glitter." I specifically said glitter. I stood there, dye under my fingernails, my back aching from bending over the yard, and felt something shift inside me. Not break, not yet, but shift, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. "Then maybe you should have done it yourself," I said quietly. The room went silent. Caroline's mouth opened in shock. Mom's face darkened. "Rachel's just tired," Mom said quickly. "She doesn't mean it." "Do you, Rachel?" I wanted to say yes, I did mean it. I wanted to say I was tired of being the unpaid help at every family function. I wanted to say that being useful wasn't the same as being valued. But I looked at their faces, Caroline's indignation, Mom's disappointment, and swallowed it all down like I always did. "No," I said. "I don't mean it. Let me get the glitter." Back in that dining room, with the October evening pressing against the windows and my family eating their perfectly cooked steaks, I felt the shift complete. The earthquake I'd been holding back finally erupted. "Am I not family?" I repeated, louder this time, my voice cutting through the comfortable sounds of silverware on china. Mom set down her knife and fork with deliberate precision. "Rachel, please, you're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I laughed, but it came out sharp, brittle. "You just served everyone at this table except me. You literally said you only serve family." "You know what I meant," Mom said, her tone suggesting I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You're always so sensitive about everything." "Sensitive?" I stood up slowly, my hands flat on the table. You want to talk about sensitive? Let's talk about Caroline, who couldn't handle a part-time job at 13 because she was too delicate. Let's talk about Caroline, who needed a $70,000 education to paint pictures no one buys. Let's talk about Caroline, who still has Mom paying her mortgage because Derek's business is finding its footing. "Rachel," Caroline gasped, her face flushing red. "How dare you? How dare I tell the truth?" I looked around the table. "Does everyone here know that Mom gave Caroline $160,000 for her house, while I've been turned down for a $2,000 loan to fix my car?" Aunt Margaret shifted uncomfortably. The twins stared with wide eyes. Derek suddenly found his phone screen fascinating again. "That's different," Mom said coldly. "Caroline has a family to support. And I don't count as family. We've established that." I picked up the empty plate in front of me, held it up like evidence in a courtroom. "This is what I am to you. An empty space, a convenience, someone to cook your meals and clean your houses and watch your children, but not someone worth feeding." "You're just jealous," Caroline spat, her practiced composure finally cracking. "You've always been jealous of me." "Jealous?" I turned to face my sister fully. "Of what, exactly? Your complete dependence on our mother. Your husband who spends more time at the country club than at work. Your life that would collapse in a week if Mom stopped writing checks." "At least I have a life," Caroline shot back. "At least I have someone who loves me. Children who need me. What do you have? Your little apartment and your boring job and my self-respect," I interrupted. "My independence, my integrity. I have those things because I built them myself, without a single handout, without anyone clearing the path for me." Mom stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood. "That's enough. You've always resented Caroline for being loved." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Even Caroline looked shocked. "For being loved," I repeated slowly. "So you admit it, you love her, and me." Mom's silence was louder than any scream. Aunt Margaret finally spoke. "Evelyn, that's cruel. Rachel's your daughter too." "Rachel's fine," Mom said, the familiar refrain. "She's always been fine. She doesn't need love, attention, basic human consideration." I laughed again, and this time it sounded unhinged even to me. "You're right. I don't need those things. I learned not to need them when I was 13 years old, and you decided I was strong enough to raise myself." I walked over to the sideboard where family photos sat in silver frames. Every single one featured Caroline as a baby. Caroline at graduation, Caroline's wedding, Caroline with the twins. I existed in none of them. "Do you want to know something funny?" I asked, picking up Caroline's wedding photo. "I paid for my bridesmaid dress by eating nothing but ramen for 2 months. I stood there at your wedding, dizzy from hunger, watching Mom cry over how beautiful you looked, and when the photographer asked for family photos, Mom had to be reminded to include me." "That's not," Caroline started. "True, check your wedding album. 3 photos. I'm in 3 photos out of 300. And in every single one, I'm at the edge, like I'm photobombing my own sister's wedding." Derek cleared his throat. "Maybe we should go." "No," I said. "Stay. Please. Watch the floor show. See what 34 years of being the family servant looks like when she finally stops serving." I walked back to my empty place at the table, picked up the unused silverware. "You know what the saddest part is? I would have been happy with crumbs. If you had just once, just one time, made me feel like I mattered as much as Caroline, I would have done anything for this family. But you couldn't even give me that." "You're being ridiculous," Mom said, but her voice wavered. "Am I? Then prove it. Tell me one time, just one, when you put my needs first, when you chose me over Caroline, when you made me feel like your daughter instead of your employee." The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and telling. Even Caroline couldn't meet my eyes. "While we're all being honest here," I continued, my voice steady now, controlled, "let's talk about some things everyone pretends not to know. Derek, would you like to tell everyone about the second mortgage on your house, the one you took out 6 months ago?" Derek's face went white. His phone clattered onto the table. "Or should I tell them about the $60,000 in credit card debt, the missed payments on the twins' private school tuition, the country club membership that's 3 months overdue? How do you—" Caroline started, then stopped, her face cycling through shock, anger, and fear. "I'm an accountant, Caroline, and Mom uses the same password for everything your birthday. Naturally. She asked me to check her online banking last month when she couldn't log in. Imagine my surprise when I saw the transfers. $50,000 in January, $30,000 in March, $25,000 just last week. Mom sank back into her chair. That's private family business. Family business. I laughed. I'm sorry. I thought you only served family. So this must be someone else's business, right? Aunt Margaret leaned forward. Evelyn, is this true? You're still supporting them? Caroline's art studio is taking time to establish itself, Mom said defensively. And Derek's investment firm is having a slow quarter. Derek doesn't have an investment firm. I interrupted. He has a laptop and a rented desk at a co-working space. His biggest investment last year was $15,000 in cryptocurrency that disappeared overnight. The month before that, it was a food truck that never materialized. Before that, a revolutionary app that was going to change how people buy groceries. Stop it, Caroline hissed, tears starting to roll down her cheeks, leaving tracks in her expensive foundation. Why? Because the truth hurts. I turned to the rest of the table. Do you all want to know what Caroline's art career has earned in the past 5 years? $700. Total. She sold 2 paintings to Mom's friend Betty, who bought them out of pity. My art isn't about money, Caroline protested. No, it's about Mom's money. Just like your house, your car, your children's education, your entire life. You're 31 years old, Caroline, and you've never paid a bill with money you earned yourself. The twins were crying now, confused and scared. Mom reached for them, but I wasn't done. And the best part, Mom remortgaged this house, our childhood home, 3 generations of family history to keep funding your lifestyle. Did you know that? Caroline Mom's one bad month away from losing everything, but sure, let's keep pretending you're an artist and Derek's an entrepreneur. That's enough, Mom shouted, actually shouted, something I'd never heard her do. You have no right. I have every right. I'm the one who's going to have to deal with this when it all comes crashing down. When you can't make the mortgage payments, who do you think you'll call? When Caroline and Derek finally burn through every penny and credit line, who's going to be expected to help the responsible one? The strong one. The one who doesn't need anything. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. You want to see something interesting. This is my savings account. $47,000. I saved every penny while living on scraps, while wearing secondhand clothes, while you were buying Caroline designer handbags with money you don't have. Caroline was sobbing now, ugly sobs that made her mascara run in black rivers. You're cruel. You're just cruel and bitter, and I'm honest. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely honest. And here's the most honest thing I'll say, you're not an artist. Caroline, you're a hobbyist with an expensive supply addiction. Derek's not an entrepreneur. He's a con man who married well. And Mom isn't a loving mother protecting her sensitive daughter. She's an enabler who destroyed one child to spoil another. Get out, Mom said quietly, deadly. Get out of my house. Your house, I laughed. You mean the bank's house, the one with 40% equity left after all the loans you've taken to fund Caroline's fantasy life? Aunt Margaret stood up. Evelyn, Rachel's telling the truth. Isn't she about all of it? Mom's silence was answer enough. My God, Margaret said. I knew you favored Caroline, but this is financial abuse. Of both of them, really. You've crippled Caroline with dependence and crushed Rachel with neglect. You don't understand. Mom started. Caroline needs to grow up, Margaret said firmly. And you need to stop using Rachel as your emotional and physical servant while bankrupting yourself for a child who should be standing on her own 2 feet. Thank you, I said to Margaret, then turned back to Mom and Caroline. You starved one daughter of love to feed the other with lies, and look where it's gotten all of us. I pushed my chair back from the table, the scraping sound cutting through Caroline's sobs like a blade through silk. I won't play this role anymore. You can't just leave, Caroline said desperately, mascara-stained face turning toward me. We're family. Despite everything, we're still family. No, I said simply. You're right. Caroline, You are family. You and Mom, Derek and the twins. You're a complete unit. I'm just the help who shares some DNA. That's not true. One of my cousins finally spoke up. Rachel, you've always been family to us. Have I asked. Then where were you all these years when I was serving every meal, cleaning every dish, being treated like hired help at every family gathering? Your silence was compliance. Aunt Margaret stood up. She's right. We all watched this happen. We all benefited from Rachel's labor while watching Evelyn pour everything into Caroline. We're all complicit. I don't need your guilt, I said to the table. I don't need your pity. I don't need anything from any of you anymore. Mom's face had gone gray, aging 10 years in 10 minutes. Rachel, if you walk out that door, you'll disown me, stop inviting me to family gatherings, treat me like I don't exist. I laughed, and it felt like freedom. You've been doing that my whole life. The only difference is now I'm choosing it for myself. Derek finally found his voice. This is insane. You're destroying your family over what jealousy money. No, Derek, I'm walking away from people who destroyed me first, piece by piece, year by year. They hollowed me out until I was nothing but a function, cook, cleaner, babysitter, wallet for emergencies, everything but a daughter, everything but a sister, everything but a person who deserved to be loved. I walked toward the door, past the sideboard with its shrine to Caroline's life, past the kitchen where I'd spent countless hours in servitude, past the hooks where guests' coats hung but never mine because I was always too busy working to be a guest. Rachel, please, Mom called out, and for the first time I heard something crack in her voice. Don't leave like this. I turned back one last time. The dining room looked like a Renaissance painting, the long table with its abandoned feast, the faces frozen in various stages of shock and grief, the empty chair that had always been mine even when I was sitting in it. You know what the ironic part is? I said. I'm the only one in this room who actually made it. I survived losing Dad. I survived being forgotten. I survived working myself to the bone while watching you hand Caroline everything on a silver platter. I survived, and I thrived, and I did it all without a single hand up from any of you. Caroline stood up shakily, Derek's hand on her elbow. So that's it, you're just going to abandon us. What about the twins? They're innocent in all this. The twins have parents who need to learn how to actually parent instead of relying on me to do it for them. Maybe it's time you all learned what it's like to stand on your own feet. You'll be alone, Mom said, and it sounded like a curse. I've always been alone, I replied. The only difference is now I won't be surrounded by people pretending otherwise. Margaret moved toward me. Rachel, wait. You're right about everything. No, I said gently but firmly. This isn't about choosing sides or fixing things. This is about me finally choosing myself. I walked through the doorway, through the foyer with its photographs that told the story of a family I was never really part of. The front door was heavy, solid oak with a century of paint layers, and it groaned as I opened it. The October night was crisp, clean. The Spanish moss swayed in the breeze like nature's own curtains, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the river moving toward the sea. I stood on that porch where I'd stood 1,000 times before, but this time I wasn't waiting to be let in. I was choosing to walk away. Behind me, I heard voices rising arguments, accusations, Mom's sharp voice and Caroline's wailing, but it was already fading, already becoming background noise to my life instead of its main soundtrack. I walked to my old Honda, the one with the rattling engine and the broken air conditioning, the one I'd kept running through determination and YouTube repair videos. It started on the first try, like it knew we were finally going somewhere that mattered. As I drove away from that Victorian house with its burden of ghosts and disappointments, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there I needed to see. For the first time in 34 years, I was driving toward something instead of away from it, toward a life where my worth wasn't measured in how much I could give without receiving, where my strength wasn't an excuse for neglect, where my existence wasn't justified only by my usefulness. I was driving toward a life where I was enough, just as I was, empty plate and all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if this story resonated with you, and please share your thoughts and experiences. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is realize we're not alone in our struggles.